going to have positive regression or have not yet had a great year, but we expect them to next year. These are guys that we expect to do better than they did the year before, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I just pressed record, so I'm going to kind of get through and do a quick again and say what this show is about. Pyromaniac.com. Doing a blab here. I'm D-Rex. I'm with PyromaniacMo. And today's show, we're going to be doing bounce back players, guys that didn't have a great year last year that we think have the mettle and the skill set and the situation to do well in 2016. And as well on this show, we're going to be talking about breakout players, guys that we think might be a little bit under the radar right now and could be about to explode and be the difference maker to give you a championship. Again, Mo just kind of spoke that, hey, is this a breakout? Is this a sleeper? Is this a bounce back? It's February. Let things shake out a little bit. Let us coin these men however we want to at this juncture. And as the season goes on and as we release draft kits and we keep doing blabs and we keep doing content, and Pyromaniac Mo has his Pyro Podcast Light show that he does on a regular basis, and then obviously we do the Pyro Podcast Heavy on a weekly basis as well. So there is going to be tons and tons of opportunity to get more fantasy goo from this point until the time when you're drafting. So I'll let you start, man. Let's if you want to get going, do you want to start out on the breakouts, or do you want to bounce between the two, or do one and
toss them out and see where the conversation goes? I'll start. And before I get going, I'll say on Twitter, if you want to follow us, I'm PyromaniacMo, PyromaniacMo. And then you can follow the heavy crew. It's at PYROMAN, the number 1, AC. And we got lots of goo for you on Twitter as well. I know D-Rex and I, on both the Twitter accounts, we just tweeted out the link to this. And always news about our podcasts and pieces that we're doing. So we're great follows if you want to talk fantasy goo with us all year long. So my first guy, and this is a definite bounce back category guy. Sometimes I think the waters could be a little muddied between which is which, but this guy is a bounce back, I'm thinking for sure. And that's Demaryius Thomas. Now, I'm expecting huge positive touchdown regression. So this cat, he's been 3 years, 2012, 2013, 2014, he scored double-digit touchdowns. 10 TDs in 2012, 14 TDs 2013, 11 in 2014. Last year, just 6. Now, he's got to have some positive regression if you ask me. One, I think Brock Osweiler, he's going to improve. He's got half a season under his belt under center. Now he's going to go into the offseason and all preseason getting the starter reps. He's going to get the majority of the reps in practice. He's going to be more comfortable. He'll have better chemistry developed with Demaryius. There'll be one more season under Kubiak's offense for Brock and for Demaryius too. They'll both be more comfortable. Now, if you look, this past year, I went and I did some math. I took out weeks 10 and 17 because both Brock and Manning passed in weeks 10 and 17. So if you look at games with just Brock, he averaged almost 11 targets a game, 10.83. In games with just Manning, 11.6. So not even a full target a game more with Manning. But the bigger factor to me is, even though Manning, I guess he averaged a little bit more targets, Demaryius did with Manning, the throws weren't as good. If you go on to Pro Football Focus, you can get, and if you have the subscription, or if you listen to us, you can get aimed throws, percentage of aimed throws. So that takes out spikes, that takes out throwaways, and it gives you a better idea of how accurate that quarterback is. Brock Osweiler, out of all the quarterbacks, was 17th most accurate, 73.4%. Peyton was 36th most accurate. So Brock, even though he's maybe not throwing or didn't throw as many to Demaryius last year, but I'm saying less than a target a game, his throws are better. He's a better quarterback, at least at this stage of Manning's game. So I think that's going to also help. Some other things. Under Kubiak, the Broncos ranked 5th in percentage for red zone passes to wide receivers, nearly 80% of the red zone touchdowns was from a wide receiver. Again, positive regression. For 3 out of the last 4 years, the guy was double-digit touchdowns, not last year. He's going to bounce back. He's on a team that throws, once they're in the red zone, 80% to the wide receiver. Demaryius himself nearly made up 1/4 of the red zone targets. He received 20 inside the red zone. Only 9 receivers had more targets inside the red zone. Bottom line, the guy was 4th most targeted wide receiver this season, 177 targets. Yet out of the top 10 targeted guys, only Jarvis Landry had fewer touchdowns. So to me, history's on his side. He's got a more accurate quarterback. They're throwing a ton. They throw a bunch of targets. The touchdowns will return, and I think he will return to fantasy relevance next year.
I agree. And, when you look at Osweiler, obviously Manning had just one of the worst seasons ever. But when you look at Osweiler, he had more in the 8 games he played, which you said, one of them they were both throwing. He had more fantasy points than Manning this year, who had 10 games. Osweiler had just under 120 fantasy points, and Manning only had 91. So when you look at that, and you've got Osweiler is a better fantasy pill tosser, so why wouldn't that be a better situation for Demaryius? I was at the Bears game where I think the first or second play of the game was a 80-yard touchdown from Osweiler to Demaryius, and so he had his best touchdown of the season from Osweiler as well. So I think all those stats that you gave are perfectly stated. Who's got a better cannon? Who's got the better accuracy? At certain points, it was just like they weren't even letting Manning throw. You saw what they were doing down in the stretch in the playoffs when he came back. It was basically like, hey, let's not let Manning screw this one up for us. Group project championship, Manning for individually on that project probably gets a D. So I completely agree with you. I'm going to talk about Osweiler quickly, and he's one of my breakout guys because I think they're going to stick with him. I think that he's earned that right. The tutelage under Manning is going to do nothing but help. He got them some big victories when Manning went down with the injury, and he kind of just got replaced by Manning in the playoffs, which I think was probably the right move because they didn't want anyone to lose it for him. But Osweiler, with that offense, with that team, I'm just thinking in general, he's going to be not even necessarily a top 20 pick at the position, but I could see him breaking out just because the depth at quarterback is so ridiculous. That's a breakout for me on that team.
Yeah, another thing I think will be going for them, the running game. When Osweiler was quarterbacking, what's his name? Didn't really get going yet. C.J. Anderson. And I think once he's kind of that second half of the season guy, but hopefully once he gets it turned around, squared away, Kubiak's system, you need a good running back to sort of balance it out. And I think that's going to help Osweiler and Demaryius as well if they can get the running game under control.
And that's one of my bounce backs is C.J. Anderson. Again, he's a second half player, but C.J., I think the confidence he's got that he was a big part in a championship after a tough season, which I think, everyone came in last year. We know it's a story we talk about a lot on these different podcasts of ours, how much he let down fantasy owners by being a first-round draft pick and then just really being a terrible one at that. But I think C.J. Anderson's got the perfect situation. He's a champion. He brought something to the table in the big game. They're going to need him because they're going to have to rely on the run a bit more with Osweiler running the show. Hillman's a goner. So I just think in situations, C.J. Anderson's going into next year, his ADP is going to slide tremendously. Who knows? Maybe he'll start getting hot again and be right back there in the discussion for second round and third round. But I think people are going to temper their expectations with him. So C.J. Anderson's a guy I think you can find value with and could be a bounce back player. Yeah,
and there's that recency bias. We have short memories, I think, in fantasy, and a lot of people are going to remember.
What are you talking about?
What's that?
What are you talking about?
Well, recency bias, and people are.
I got you. Short memory.
Well done, sir.
This guy.
I like it. Yeah, so I'm with you. I think he's going to be value. Hillman's out of there. And he was banged up. CJ Anderson was banged up at the beginning of the season. He had some lingering injuries that I don't think really got right until the second half of the season. Now, whatever, excuses. He's shown us he can do it, and I think he's going to be value. And that's what you're looking for. You're not always looking for, I don't know, I think everybody always wants to hit it out of the park and go for someone. But really, you want draft day value. And I think CJ Anderson is going to provide some value for you.
Let's think. It's Kubiak's team. Kubiak's notoriety. He always had a great power run game. The blocking schemes have always been amazing for wherever he's gone. Even back when he was, on the Broncos 20-ish years ago. So I like their offseason to be able to figure out what they need to do as a team to get CJ and everyone rolling so that they don't have to, in Brock's first season, rely too much on him. And really all they got to do is stay competitive in games, have a good balanced attack because that defense is so ridiculous.
All right, I got another bounce back, and I'm going to go with, got a couple here. I'm going to pull off from my team, the Lions, and again, this is when you can argue bounce back, break out, but Golden Tate, I mean, he's a bounce back in considering he did not finish as well as he did the previous season. 2014, he had 5 games where he went over 100 yards. 3 of those games went over 130, and that was several of those games was when Calvin Johnson was not there, and that's going to be the situation next year. He showed he could do it when Calvin was not there. Look at this season. Pre-Cooter. You remember those days, pre-Cooter? Pre-Cooter. Tate.
I came out of the womb getting Cooter, buddy.
Heather Cooknicki and say, oh, never mind. Sorry. It's going down memory lane there in middle school. Pre-Cooter for the Lions, Tate averaged 5.6. That was with Lombardi. 5.6 fantasy points per game. Joe Lombardi, it's in the blood, but it just didn't show to be on the field. 5.6. Once Cooter got there, Kansas City, week 8, and then they had the bye week. Once Cooter got there, he averaged almost 4 points per game better, a little over 3.5 points per game better under Cooter. Now, this year, Tate is he's a beast with yards after catch. If you remember this year, he was 5th with 544 yards after the catch. The season before, again, when Johnson missed many a game or was even just the decoy and didn't do anything, in 2014, he led the league with yards after the catch. And by kind of a wide margin, he had 709 yards after the catch. So the guy's got heart. When he gets the ball, he's a tough one to bring down. He's got speed once he gets the ball. He's got a will to get more yards, get to the end zone. Now, Tate this is why he's the bounce back, 33rd best wide receiver in standard scoring, 24th in PPR this year. What can he do? And again, in 2014, when Calvin wasn't there for a while, 13th in standard, 11th in PPR. I think we're going to see more of that Tate next season. Even though Calvin's going to be gone, I think it's going to be good for Golden Tate.
Yeah, and I think is Calvin gone for sure? Something tells me that guy's not leaving. He hasn't left yet. I feel like he's just trying to make himself feel important, and he's going to realize, you know what, there's a lot of money to leave on the table. Why not just play a couple more years or at least one more year and at least have his little Kobe Bryant, every time he goes to a stadium, people can be like, oh, I got to see Calvin Johnson play.
We'll see. And, when guys make a call like that so close to the season, a lot of emotions clouding them. But, I can see Calvin walking away. I don't think he was ever one to be live, eat, breathe, sleep football. He never seemed to really have the heart like other folks did, and just like, it was his passion. I don't think it was his passion. And if he's not going to be elite, if he's not going to be at the top of his game, I don't think he wants to be remembered like that. I could see him doing it.
Yeah, I can't too. I just thought it was weird that the other day I was looking a few days ago, like, they're still not sure. I'm like, I thought he already retired. Get it over with. But, if he does retire, what I'm seeing in a lot of pre-mock drafts is the Lions going for a wide receiver, which I think, again, helps your boy Tate in his bounce-back situation. Yep. There's a lot of different great players that are kind of almost more in the mold of a Tate. Than say, some big, tall Superman guy, kind of guy like Calvin Johnson. They're talking about Braxton Miller maybe being a guy they're excited to get because he's so fast. Courtney Coleman's a guy that I love, that's kind of got more of that Golden Tate 5'11", Steve Smith Sr. kind of guy. But so I think that helps their situation. They it seems like if Calvin's gone, they might be getting a wide receiver with that first pick of theirs.
Yeah, and like they said, there's a lot of wide receiver 2s in the draft this year, and I'm not saying Golden Tate's going to be top 10 or anything. I certainly think he's going to be higher than 33rd in standard, and I think you're going to find a value come draft day when picking him.
Nice. Well, I'm going to stick with your team as well, and then I know you've actually got a guy as well that I don't know if you've got him as a breakout, I think, but a bounce back, and a rookie season, you can't put too much into a rookie season, but Amir Abdullah. I think that he's a kind of guy that had some high hopes. He had a skill set that people really thought maybe he could bounce in and be something special, but he kind of had an underwhelming season, all things considered. But I like what I think he can if they're happy with him and they stick with him and he starts getting the carries. Last year he only had 143 carries. Couple touchdowns. He had a touchdown in the receiving game as well. But if they can get him and he's going to be more in that 250 carry zone for the Lions, then I really like his bounce back ability. I'm not sure how much you're planning on your boy that you'll probably speak of in a minute, how much they're going to be giving him the ball. And, Riddick's still around there and he's a great PPR action, but we know that they cut Joique Bell. I still like Abdullah. They went high on him. They're not ready to just cut the cord with this guy. And he has that. If they didn't have such great pass catchers in Zenner and Riddick, he has the three down back skill set. But it just seems like they've got too much talent. And they need to feed some of these other guys that he's never going to really be able to stay in the game like he should. And Abdullah. Yeah,
I agree. Abdullah, we saw flashes of it early, and with Bell being there, I don't know why they were sticking with him as long as they were. I think Amir, they just need to find out how to use him right. They got the ingredients, they don't have the recipe yet. And I think once they can get that hammered in, and I think Cooter, their current offensive coordinator, has a better skill set. He's got a better plan for the offense than Lombardi did. So I think he can figure out the running back by community and put guys in the right spots. I hope, because I think they were just misused last year. He wasn't using them.
Yeah, and there's it's interesting also when you look at Amir. I don't know which number he was at the running back, but he was taken in the second round. He was like the 54th overall pick in last year. So this is a guy, we know that running backs are taken a lot lower than they used to be. So this is a guy that was highly sought after. They used a high draft pick, their second round pick on him. So I think they're going to try and prove that pick far more than they're going to try and move on from that pick.
Yeah, and I like them. Lots of talent. Like I said, I really think they've got the ingredients. They just didn't know how to have the right recipe. I like that analogy, and I think Lombardi can get it there. I'm going to roll right into my guy, which is also there, and he's a breakout, Zach Zenner. I like all the guys. Now, I'm going to pat myself on the back a little bit here, but 2 years ago. Now, this was after Bush was coming off the season in 2012, sometime in the 2013 fantasy draft. Bush was coming off a season where he finished 14th, and everybody was drafting Bush higher. And this was one of the first times I think I was on the heavy, and I said I like Joique Bell to finish higher. Everyone had Bush higher, and indeed Bell did finish higher. Last year, Riddick was my man. I called Riddick, and Riddick indeed finished on top. I believe he was 18th in both standard and PPR. Amir finished 44th in standard. This year, I still like Amir. I like the call, and that's why it's February. I want to see the preseason, how they're using these guys. But I really like Zach Zenner. In the preseason last year, he led all running backs with 183 rushing yards. Had 2 carries that went for over 20 yards. One of them went for over 40 yards. The guy averaged 5.2 in the preseason. Now, out of backs that toted the rock at least 30 times in the preseason, he had 5.2. The highest yards per carry was Thomas Rawls with 5.3. So he was right there with guys that carry the ball at least 30 times or more. I think Zenner, he could be in line for, if they figure out the recipe, he could be in line for the goal line work. I think he could be the hammer at the goal line. Now, it's hard to predict touchdowns, but I think he's going to be put in a situation, red zone back, workhorse in the goal line between the tackles. He could be put in a situation where he could easily garner high-end touchdowns. And if you're scared of 3 backs, hell, everybody's doing running back by community now. And I really think with Riddick, Abdullah, Zenner, you could have some fantasy gold there. You just got to figure out how to use them. And I like Zenner between the tackles. He was a tough dude to bring down if you watched him in the preseason. Then he got injured. So I'm really excited to see what he can do. I think he can certainly break out, as many people expected him to do last year. I think this year is looking good. He's got the right situation to do it.
Cool. I like it. I'm going to go to a couple. I'll just do a back-to-back bounce back guys at the quarterback position. And I'll start with Flacco, Mr. Joe Flacco. I think that's a guy that had some good things going for him. He had some really big games actually when he was healthy, and then obviously got banged up like everyone else in the team. Only ended up playing 10 games, but did some great things, especially was running the ball. He always gets a few running touchdowns. I expect with a healthy Steve Smith who's coming back, I expect they've got the rookie that they drafted last year. I'm spacing his name right now. The guy that looks like he's 20 years older than he is.
Perriman,
yeah, Brett Perriman. So him coming back and playing, hopefully, and having that stretch the field. They got rid of Torrey Smith because of him. And then Aiken, the way that he showed up there. They got Max. You got the Max Williams, the tight end. Gosh, I mean, this guy's got talent out the wazoo, and we know that the whisperer with Tressman is down there. And I just love what Flacco is going to be able to do with all those weapons. And I know that he's got one of the easier side schedules. His schedule is a little bit soft. I think he's like at the 19th easiest schedule or hardest schedule. I mean, so he's got a good place in that. And let's be honest, if you're going for the explosion factor and guys being able to light it up on a given week, Flacco is that kind of guy like a Ben Roethlisberger that can go 405 touchdowns. So I think this team is a lot closer to relevance and a lot closer to being right there at a playoff team as they are perennially than people give them credit for, especially on the offensive side of the ball. So I have high expectations for a Flacco. The value's there, as we talked about with quarterbacks. There's so many quarterbacks that just like, I don't know. Last year at quarterback position, we were talking earlier, there was 12 4,000-yard passers. 12. Yeah. So if you're in a 12-man league, that pretty much says you can get a quarterback that's threw for 4,000 yards. That shows you how the game has changed. So I love a Flacco. I think he's going to be a good time and come at a value, and he's going to provide a bounce-back performance for fantasy owners. Another guy that I'm digging on, and this is probably easy, this is a layup one, but Tony Romo. Romo's got one of the easiest schedules of anyone. He's obviously hungry to get back and prove that he's the Romo of old and worth all this money that they throw at him. He's got the weapons. What the team is garbage without him. The team was just in such a bad way when he was gone. Then he comes back. Then he's gone again. And you just knew that this team is just it was in trouble. And, yeah, I see a PK Ripper. Welcome, buddy. and we got some other Smash TV Radio's not buying into my Romo call. I think he's gonna. The question is, can he stay healthy? There's no doubt about it. That's the fear. But that's why you're going to be able to get him with such a value that don't put all your eggs in that basket. But if he is healthy and he is playing, he's got a great matchup. He can go off. He's got that kind of action. So I like Romo as a bounce back. Like I said, he's got a piece of cake schedule this year. He does very well when he's got a cake schedule. I think his other guy, Dez, needs a bounce back season as well. So if he can stay, hey, and I agree with you. I'm not saying take Smash. There's so many quarterbacks that I would take over a Romo. It's ridiculous, but Romo's going to be sliding. I'm just responding to some of these messages that are going down there. I love a Jameis. I like a Mariota as much as Romo as well. I do. But when you're sitting there and you're in the 14th round next year, and Romo's going to still be available, take him. He's good because you can stash him on your bench, and in certain matchups, he could be great. And there's nothing that could say that Romo couldn't just start lighting it up. If he can play every game, just start lighting it up. Hey, little monster. My dog just came up and said hi.
Yeah, I think this goes to show, though, why you can get late round quarterback strategy. And I just, on the Pyro Light podcast, just talked to Denny Carter, who does the Live in the Stream podcast with JJ Zacharyson, who is also a friend of Pyro. I did an interview with him last year. But we were discussing exactly that. And just think of Romo and Flacco and Winston and Mariota and all these guys. Like you said, there was 12 quarterbacks that threw for over 4,000 yards. I think there was 13 that threw 29 touchdowns or more. That every year there's the most amount of quarterbacks that make it into QB1 territory versus running backs or wide receivers. And all of these guys is a reason why you can stream and why you can go late round and go early wide receiver running back. I'm going to jump in on the quarterback talk, and I suppose this will fall into breakout territory. But Mariota, everybody compares him to the Winston, and that's kind of the way I looked at it. They averaged just about the same. Winston, Mariota. Winston averaged 17.3 fantasy points per game. Mariota 17.2. Basically the same. Now, remember, Mariota played, I think it was 10 games, Winston 16. So that's why I went with points per game. They were very, very similar. Here's the thing, though. Mariota, he had a catch for a touchdown. He ran for a touchdown. He's passing touchdowns. And they didn't even really use his legs. And that was one of the big attributes he has that I don't think they really showcased. And I think they will if Malarkey knows what's good for him. And just looking back to last season, Winston had 53 rushing attempts. And most of those were kind of ugly. He's not a very good runner. And Mariota only had 34. Yeah, he's a far better rusher. So I think that's an untapped quality he has that they can really use. I think he's more of a complete player. Both Mariota and Winston had 4 games that went for over 20 fantasy points. Again, Winston played 16, and Mariota played, played 12, I think. So
yeah.
Although they both had 4 games where they passed for 20 fantasy points, Mariota did it in 4 less games. I think that's amazing. Mariota, he put up multiple touchdowns numerous times. Winston only had, I believe, 1 game where he threw he amounted to 3 touchdowns or more. 1 game with 3 touchdowns or more. Mariota, 4 games where he put up 3 touchdowns or more. So you talk about an explosion factor. He had more games, and he did it in less total games. So I think Mariota is really the one out of the 2 that I would expect to take a bigger leap next season. Although I got to like the weapons in Tampa Bay much better than I do in Tennessee. Hopefully the draft might change some of that around.
Yeah, no, there's no question. And they're saying, hey, we're gonna open this thing up for Mariota to run more, use his dynamic playmaking ability. I think it was smart for them not to do that this year. And, you know, you got to make sure the guy, he did on a run get crushed and got injured this season. So it's kind of like you got to be smart. We saw what happened with RG3 when they let him go all silly all over the place, kept on getting knee injuries. And, you know, you just don't want on a franchise quarterback, especially the number 2 pick overall, you just want to make sure you don't lose your damage your goods before they get producing. So yeah, and that Smash TV mentioned that this year Winston ran. He was second most behind Cam Newton with 6 touchdown rushes, which is pretty. No, our scoring, we do a kind of our own hybrid scoring. Actually, he's asking a question. We use this Pyro scoring, which is kind of it's a standards with a spin. And we do that for all the Pyromaniac.com stuff. So just to go back to I get distracted when I read these messages. Sorry. But to go back to the quarterbacks, the last guy I'll do for at the position of there is Kirk Cousins, who I think was 3rd in rushing touchdowns behind Winston and had a surprising number of rushing touchdowns himself with 5. Who would have thought that guy's going to be able to throw in 5 rushing? So that was fool's gold on top of the 29 touchdowns that he had, and he's a 4,000-yard kind of guy. So I like a Cousins. He's got that explosion factor. Ton of games with over a handful of games with over 4 touchdowns. A number of games with 3. Always, I think, had at least 1 or 2 touchdowns. Just like what he's going to be able to bring on that breakout. It's his team. Whether they get him. That get him as a franchise player where he's making a ton of money, or they sign him to a long term. It really doesn't matter. I don't think it goes to his head. It's tricky for Washington. I think they should franchise him because if he does not come to play next year, at least you're not totally saddled with some huge contract. But I like Cousins in fantasy football, and anybody. One of the reasons why he's going to go higher than probably he should. Right now, I think his ADP on draft boards in mock drafts right now is like 14 or 13. But one of the reasons why he'll go higher is because anybody that played him in the championship game last year, he won it for you. He lit it up in the final game and was the number 1 quarterback in the championship week. So if you were ballsy enough to play him in that game and he did that for you, you'll remember, and you'll probably be sitting there when you're sitting there in the the 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th round, and he's there. You're going to be the kind of guy that's going to pick him up.
Yeah, and real quick to talk some of the messages we're getting. When I said multi-TD games, I meant Mariota had 4 games where he had 3 touchdowns or more. Winston only had 1 game where he had at least 3 touchdowns. Indeed, Mariota had 7 games with multi-touchdowns. I was saying 3 or more, which is kind of an explosion line. You know, if you can get above that 3. 2 is kind of what you're hoping for and expecting, but getting above the 3 touchdowns or more. And I think, again, Mariota did it 4 times with fewer games. Winston did it only once, playing a full slate, and I think that's what gives Mariota that explosion factor. Also, just to go with some of the questions we're getting here, the Pyro scoring is basically the same. 1 for quarterbacks, 1 point for every 25 passing yards, 4 points per touchdown. 1 point for every 10 yards rushing. All of that is standard. 6 points for rushing touchdowns. All of that is standard. The only thing I think we do a little different is it's -2 for a passing interception and -2 for a fumble. I think usually it's -1. So we just ding a little bit more if they're turning the ball over. Other than that, I think it's pretty much standard. And I believe that's the same. But for our running backs or wide receivers, we just charge a little bit more for coughing the ball up. 2 points taken off as opposed to 1. Other than that, it's pretty standard scoring. I could even ask the folks out there, I wonder which now sophomore quarterback you would rather go with. I wonder if they'd rather go with Mariota, who I think is more explosive and has a more complete game, or would they rather go with Winston? Question for the folks out there. Rolling along as you guys ponder that one. I got one. Yeah, Smash TV Radio says he would rather go with Jameis. I wonder why that is. I just think Jameis is pales in comparison to Mariota and what he can do. But God, he's got great weapons around him, right? And Mariota.
Imagine if Evans hadn't dropped those. I mean, he had about 6 touchdowns, 4 of which were like literally like 50, 40-yard plus touchdowns. If that guy can figure it out and stop partying and listening to Future with Manziel and catch the ball, Winston's going to be better off. And let's be honest, as a Chicago guy myself, I'm going to let my dog out. When it's only a good thing for fantasy when you've got the coach that they just fired, Lovie Smith, is gone. That's only going to help everyone in fantasy.
Yeah, and at the same token, I agree. Smash TV radio. I love the weapons down in Florida there that they're surrounding them with, and I do not like a malarkey behind the reins. That is one of the most yawning, unimpressive coaching hires I've seen thus far. I don't have much faith in it, but I've got more faith in the abilities of Mariota. Now, one guy, D, I'm curious to get your opinion on, and the next 2 guys I'm going to bring up here, I'm kind of wavering back and forth. I've been going back and forth, and that's the beauty, I think, of Pyros. We have differing opinions, and half the time I'm changing my opinions just from listening to you guys and getting input. And, not to get political at all, but it's insane for someone to not change their opinion. It's insane to stick with one thing. There's weapons of mass destruction there. We're going to go in. Well, there's not. Let's just keep going anyway. Like, we learn, we grow as we live, right? And so hopefully we're learning and growing and changing our opinion. And I would expect by the time we get to the season, maybe you and I and some of the listening audience will have changed our opinions as well. That's why I love hashing it out right now. So I'm curious as to what you think. I got to bounce back with Eddie Lacy. So I'm thinking he's going to do better. Now, I know there's a lot of ifs. Now, for as heavy as he appeared, and everyone's making it out to be, he still had 11 runs that went for over 15 yards or more. Just imagine if he sheds a little bit of weight. And I don't know, was he really that much bigger than when he came in the league? 25 pounds, 20 pounds maybe, but I don't know if it was as much weight as everyone's making it out to be. I certainly think he will benefit him if he loses some and gets in a better conditioning shape once he hits practice. But still, I was surprised he had 11 runs that went for more than 15. Now, rookie season, he averaged 4.1 yards a carry, and he finished 6th best in standard, according to Pyro scoring, 11 touchdowns. Football Outsiders ranked his offensive line his rookie year 5th best. They scored just over 26 points per game that season. His sophomore year, 2014, again, 6th best in standard, went from 11 to 13 touchdowns, 4.6 yards a carry, and his offensive line ranked 8th best. That year, they led the NFL with 30.4 points per game. Last season, he still averaged 4.1. That's right in his ballpark. That's what he averaged when he was a rookie. And he was 24th in standard, which is still RB2 technically. But he only had 5 all-purpose touchdowns. That really hurt. And one of the reasons I think his touchdowns was down, his line, which at one point when he came in was 6th best, according to Football Outsiders, then 8th best. His line, ranked by Football Outsiders last year, was 25th. His line took a huge step in the wrong direction. They only averaged 23 points per game. That's over a touchdown per game less than they did the previous season. Everything was off for Green Bay. Jordy not being there. Cobb having to go to 1, didn't score as much. I think with Jordy back and a healthy, better offensive line and an in-shape Lacy, these are all small fixes I think they can do, and I would expect Lacy, who, again, first 2 years was top 10 running back. I think he can get back there. I think he can get a step in the right direction. I expect him to bounce back, and I expect him to be a draft day value because of recency bias, because everybody remembers the most recent year. So I think he'll be a value come draft day.
Well, that's the question. What kind of value do you think he brings? I mean, he's on a high-powered offense. For some reason, people are enamored by the passing and even the running attack of the Packers. Where does he go? I like him if I'm sitting there at the end of the third round and he's still available and he's shed the pounds and he's on the good side of everyone's graces on the team and the coaching staff. But if he hasn't slipped too much and he's still sitting in that zone where he's like, a second rounder and fool's gold is everyone's still on his jock, then I need to stay away. So for me, I agree. He's a bounce back player for sure. I don't like him because I still think that situation and something about fantasy, people just love Green Bay for some reason. I think he'll still be higher than you would expect. So if I can get him late and I can get the value there, and I'm sitting there, I'm not probably going to be going pretty heavy on the wide receivers my first 2-3 rounds. If he's there in the fourth and he's my RB1, hey, I like it. Yeah. I do, but I got to see it. And the one thing that I hate about the whole team, Green Bay, from a fantasy standpoint, one, they've never given me any luck. I've never, except for back in the day when Sterling Sharp was there. That guy gave me luck back in the day. That guy was awesome. But literally no teams in fantasy football have done me less points and given me more headaches than the Green Bay Packers. So I just tend to kind of stay away from them. The one year that I went high on Rodgers, he did terrible for me. I'm not a guy that's going to go after him. So the one thing that I'm scared about with Lacy is that fact. McCarthy just does not seem to have a steady flow where he's got the confidence to stick to his game plans. All of a sudden, if Eddie Lacy on any given Sunday runs into the back of his lineman 3 plays in a row, even if it's not his fault, for some reason, all of a sudden, McCarthy starts shoveling in James Starks and says, "Okay, Starks, it's your game today, and Lacy, you're done. I'm not happy with what you did on that first drive." And it's just this very kind of almost he doesn't let the game play out and unfold. And when there used to be the bell cow backs in the days of old, and even this week, Emmitt Smith was talking about how he doesn't think it'll be hard if Adrian Peterson doesn't break his record. It'll be very hard for another running back to break it. And basically what he was saying along with that is the fact that these guys aren't getting these up to the 23, 25-plus carries. And Emmitt Smith was like, in a game when I was playing running back, I didn't get grooving and going until that 23rd carry, till that 25th carry. And they just don't seem to give that kind of action to these running backs anymore. And Lacy, more than anything, because of the way McCarthy just has this kind of – he changes so fast on what the plan wants to be based on the first couple drives. I think he can, on a regular basis, be in there and just not be his day. And you as a fantasy owner are watching that game, you're like, right away. It's the first quarter, and you're like, Lacy is not going to get the ball today.
Yeah, and, reading some of the reports here, Smash TV's not hip to Lacy, but, again – like you say, if I land 3 wide receivers and I'm taking Lacy, who sheds a little bit of weight, I think the weight problem was kind of overblown a bit. I would be very happy. Now, I just looked it up. He's currently, I think those mocks were coming from the last month, currently going at the start of the 3rd round, which I'm not hip to that. If he's 4th round, then I think you're talking value. 3rd round, beginning of the 3rd round, I'm not going with Lacy, not at this point.
Can you see a situation where if he loses the weight and the press is good and he understands he can't be messing around? This is a guy that's got his head on his shoulder. He just likes In-N-Out Burger. You can't blame him. Do you see a situation or a world that we live in where he's not going in the 3rd round or higher? I really don't.
No.
Just because he has done it in the past and people are enamored by that offense, even though it's more of a passing offense. So we'll see. I just don't see a situation. Maybe I'm wrong. If it does, and everyone just stays away with certain leagues, you know how it is, then great. Yeah, if you can get him in the 4th round, awesome. But just something tells me he's a 3rd rounder or higher.
And I think a telling tale is going to be the offensive line. If they do something to shore it up, I think that's going to be fantastic. Again, when Eddie Lacy's first 2 seasons, he was 6-6. So he was a top 10 running back his first 2 seasons. His line was a top 10 offensive line first 2 seasons. This year, he was ranked 24th. His line ranked 25th. So I think keeping an eye on their line, what they do in the offseason, how they draft, that might be telling too. If they shore it up or if they go in some other spots because they've got some needs in other areas, that might help out as well.
Yeah, and Smash TV Radio, you can't always go by last year's stats, my man. You got to be able to look at trends changing, and you got to look at his whole career, the 3 years he's got. And if all you're doing in your drafts going into next year is looking at their stat line from last year and the amount of total yards they had, whether injury played a part, whether a bad situation, whether too many cheeseburgers play a part, you can't only look at last year's stats. So you got to have a little bit of intuition and say, hey, I think some situations can change here. I think the offense can jive. And again, as everyone said, as PK Ripper said and Mo said, Jordy Nelson being gone and then coming back next year, think about how that helps this offensive line, even if it's the same exact offensive line, because now all of a sudden you've got to move a couple guys back, and you can't really rely just solely on the line being stacked. So KWS is asking what the stats were 2 years ago on Eddie Lacy. They must have been good because he went in my league second overall, and then in my other league he went third. So I'm looking at him. Eddie Lacy in 2014 he had 246 carries. He had 1,139 yards, 9 touchdowns, and he caught 4 touchdowns and had 42 receptions. So that was good enough for him to be sixth with 230.6 points. When you think about that, this year's number one running back was Devonta Freeman at 247. So that tells me that he had a pretty great season, and he can get back there because, in all honesty, that's not that many carries. It's not that many yards. He was able to get some damage with some targets. He had the fourth most targets He had a lot of targets, 55 targets, caught 42 of them, and he got those 4 touchdowns. So he's averaging almost 15 points per game. So I like to look at that number as well as not just last year.
His rookie season, 2013, he had 284 attempts, almost 1,200 rushing yards, 11 touchdowns, 35 receptions for 257 yards, and he finished with 207.5 fantasy points. And again, we're getting this. A great site is FF Today. You can put in your own scoring. You can get other folks scoring and see it. FF Today is where we're getting it. And another breakout guy I like is Valverde.
One thing I want to talk about with Lacy, and we'll move on, and this is something that Dog was talking about last offseason heading in, which had me even more so staying away from him just because I knew everyone was talking about how he's a top 3 running back, is he's got asthma. So not only when he's fat, he's an asthma guy. So when I was giving my reference and talking about how Emmitt Smith was saying, hey, he couldn't get going until his 23rd carry, that's just not the game that Lacy's going to be playing. So he's not just that bell cow back, almost because his health won't permit him to be. And that offense is a passing attack. Aaron Rodgers loves just dropping it back and winging it around. So I think a merger of those last 2 or 3 years for Eddie Lacy are what you're going to get. 1,100, 10 TDs. Hopefully he gets a bunch of receptions and gets a few TDs there. I think that's what you're going to get, somewhere in that 210 to 230 point range.
Yeah, and like I said, he's going right now 4th in the 3rd round. That's a little early for my blood. We'll see what shakes out. But I'm going to throw this guy right on it because I'm interested in what you have to say on this one, too. I know it's kind of your turn, but I was surprised this guy's going after Lacy right now. Lamar Miller, who to me should be going way ahead of Lacy. Lamar Miller, I think, I don't know what you can call him. If he's going to be bounce back, breakout, whatever, I think he's going to have a better year next year. With the caveat of it depends on where he lands. He just came out in the news and said he's ready to be the main back. He wants to carry the full load, and they just did not use him right, and he still did very well in fantasy. He had 11 runs for over 15 yards, which I think he can do more. The guy's fast as lightning. PFF, Pro Football Focus, has the 9th highest breakaway percentage. That's yards gained when he's running for over 15 yards on a carry. 16th most elusive back, according to Pro Football Focus. 28 broken tackles. And the guy finished 6th in standard, and he didn't even get 200 carries. They did not use him, and he still did incredibly well. Of the top 12 running backs, only Danny Woodhead and David Johnson had fewer carries than Miller. Didn't even get to 200. And I think a situation next year, wherever he lands, if he's getting more than 200 carries, he has to be, I would say, top 5 running back. I think has got a ton of potential.
Yeah, and all those guys, when you've got D'Angelo, Gurley, and himself, and that's like, they're all right there in the same points. They're within 10 of each other. So essentially, the way that he does not get the carries, it is ridiculous. I think they gave him last year here. Let me look. They gave him essentially 15.9 touches a game. Which is ridiculous for him. So imagine if he's getting to 20 to 25 just right there per game, the amount of stats and points you're going to get. He's a top 3 guy. Yeah. So now I hope he stays in I really hope that he stays in Miami, because I think Gase and the situation there will be great for him, especially in that I just think that it's a perfect situation for him. We'll see what goes on, but if he takes the money and goes somewhere else, he could be an afterthought real quickly.
Pulls a Steve Miller. Go on, take the money and run.
Yes. We've seen guys do it in the past, and it usually doesn't work out. But Miller, hopefully he doesn't have to change tattoos on his other bicep to where his next team is. But we'll see. I like your Miller call for sure. I'm going to go to a breakout for me, and I'm thinking Carlos Hyde could have a breakout year. I think he's going to have that situation with Chip Kelly. Chip Kelly runs the ball a lot more than people give it credit for. Last year you had DeMarco Murray, who kind of was doing really good for fantasy owners through the first 6 or so games. And then all of a sudden this bad press started coming out, and it just seemed like everything kind of fell to pieces for him. But he also had Ryan Matthews clogging in the situation too when he was healthy. Now, that doesn't seem, in my opinion, to be an issue here in San Francisco. If Carlos Hyde can stay healthy, he is the bona fide back and going to get all the love and all the Chip Kelly running. So in that situation, I really like it. Plus, I think Kaepernick, if he's the quarterback, will be using a lot more of the pistol stuff and a lot more read option, which I think helps open stuff up and give some better carries for Carlos. I'm down with the breakout season from Carlos Hyde. He did it in the first game last year, but then didn't do jack on a stick. I like him in that situation, even if the 49ers aren't a great team. And it came out this week that they do have probably the toughest schedule of any team heading into this year based on opponents and win percentage.
Yeah, boy, Carlos Hyde, I'm not sure. I've heard Chip Kelly kind of talking up Jared Hayne. And, what was interesting when I was kind of doing some research for this, I looked up who had the most, because I knew Zenner did really well in the preseason, and I was almost positive he had the most rushing yards. Indeed, he did in the preseason. You know who was second for most rushing yards in the preseason was Jared Hayne, 8 yards behind Zach Zenner. Jared Hayne on 25 carries averaged 7 yards a carry in the preseason.
They cut him, though. I know they brought him back at the end of the year, but he's a lot more of a special team. That's the rugby dude, right? The guy from Australia. The reason why he got so many carries is because he had never even played the friggin' the American football, and they cut him last year for I think 4 or 5 games, and then they brought him back at the very end. I'm not too worried about him, to be honest.
Well, right. I like what he can do. I think he'll be interesting, and I know Kelly was talking about him. But I've also heard rumors him not, getting shipped off. One thing that concerns me about Carlos Hyde, he's got we've seen a very small sample size. And I forget when I was kind of doing some prep last summer, I added up his games where he had double-digit carries, and I forget what it was, but in his double-digit carry games, it was less than 4 yards a carry. It was like 3.7 was his average when he got the rock at least 10 times in a game. Now, I started to change my mind when I saw him play, against the Vikings, the first game out. But how many times is the game script going to go that way? How many times is San Francisco going to be handing the ball off? Are they going to be that type of offense? Because that's what I think he needs is to be up, to be running the ball, sort of ball control offense. Now, hey, Chip Kelly might blow that whole thing up once he gets there. And it's always interesting when Kelly's involved to see what will happen. But I'm concerned with the quality of the San Francisco and how they're going to be. I don't know if the game script's going to allow him to get a lot of carries. He was certainly dynamic in that Minnesota game, but very small sample size we've seen thus far.
I completely agree with that sentiment. There's no question it's not a team that's going to get out ahead of you very often, where you just need to rely on the run. That he got that 26 carries in that Minnesota game week 1. Now, he did get a couple other games where he was getting over 20 carries, which I like. So it is a guy, I think, Hyde, if he plays all 16 games, I could really, really see him getting a lot of carries just because who are you going to give it to? Gaskins? You going to give it Reggie Bush? Is he even playing anymore? Is he still in the middle of trying to sue St. Louis?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, and I think at the end of the day, if Kaepernick is their quarterback, who I do like, I'm a Kaepernick believer. I'm a fan. Hopefully he can turn his career around. We know that Jim Harbaugh thinks he can, and I think hopefully Kelly can be the guy to do it. But Kaepernick has got terrible passes. He's a terrible accuracy on his passes. Chip Kelly is going to have to tote the ball. He's going to be looking at games where the quote-unquote, I don't really care about mechanics. Kaepernick is just playing and ringing the ball off the sideline and overthrowing guys, underthrowing them, and missing everyone, where Chip's just going to be like, screw it. We just got to run the ball.
It's going to be interesting to see what goes on there. And, God, even we've been talking about Kaepernick for a long time. I mean, you were one of the first people, I think, in the fantasy industry that was really up on the guy. And
sure.
Home run swing the first 2 years. And then what the hell happened? I don't know what happened with that guy. He just
he read his own press. There's no story in the history of sports of a guy that got high on himself and was reading his own press, thought he was, he was in the Super Bowl his first year as a starter. He just read into it. He started, like they say, throwing. Another thing that Emmitt Smith said this week, you can't have a leader of men at the quarterback position walking around the locker room with headphones on and disengaging and not being a cork soaker to your teammates. And that's just what he did. He started getting high on himself. So hopefully he's been humbled. If anything's going to humble you, and I saw him on the sideline at the Bears game that I went to the Bears-Niners game last year. If anything's going to humble you, it's having Blaine Gabbert being chosen to start over you. That'll do it, I'll tell you right now. So he was walking around the sideline in the same way that RG3 was for a whole lot of that second half of last season, looking around like, how the hell did I lose this job? We'll see. The truth is, I hope Kaepernick can do it. I hope Chip Kelly can turn around. I'm a Niners fan. They're one of my favorite teams. I want Bolden to stick around, and let's go to that. Bolden's one of my guys. Bolden's a bounce back guy for me. I like Bolden if he stays there because I think Chip Kelly, a slot receiver in Chip Kelly's offense, is going to be good. Whether it's Blaine or Kaepernick, I don't care. I think Bolden's going to be the safety blanket, so to speak, for him. Now, if Bolden doesn't stick around San Francisco and splits, let's see, in his 13th year, I think he's smart enough to go and choose pastures that are going to do him right and get him stats that can get him into the Hall of Fame. I did a tweet earlier in the week that said, basically if he's 1,000-yard season, Bolden, he'll be in the top 10 all-time receiving yards for wide receivers. So this is a guy that has in the closeout of his career, is certainly trying to incentivize his stats, pad his stats, so that he can get deeper in and get better likelihood to be a Hall of Famer. So if he does leave San Francisco, I could see him going back to the Ravens. Playing with Flacco again. I could see him going to the Patriots, which is, I've heard some rumblings that say, hey, is there a better wide receiver out there right now that the Patriots could use with a guy like Edelman and Gronk, who just are so awesome, than a Bolden that could come in and be smart enough to learn the reads in that offense. And I think the Bolden, if he leaves San Francisco, which I still think he'll have a great season if he stays, he'll go to a situation where he can really get some damage done. So I would love to see Bolden wearing number 81, Moss's old number, on the Patriots, and I'm sure Tom Brady would love it too.
Yeah, one thing I was wondering about, and this is my last running back here, and I want to know what you think about this guy as well. Melvin Gordon, I mean, goodness gracious, talk about press. You were talking about Kaepernick reading his own press. There was a ton of press surrounding Gordon. Their offensive line was completely decimated. At one point, I remember there was like 4 or 5 starters were questionable. I think 3 of them were out. It was just horrific. I mean, look at Phillip Rivers' first half of the season versus the second half of the season, and look at the amount of sacks and hurries and knockdowns he had. The line was porous, and it really affected the team. You know, one reason I know some people thumb their nose at yards per carry. Christopher Harris was just talking about this, that like, well, Melvin Gordon only has 3.5 yards per carry. Well, did anybody on that team, any running back, have better than 3.5? No. I mean, and I think a lot of that has to do with the line. It's not as reflective of the running back in this situation. San Diego's offensive line ranked 31st, according to Football Outsiders. 2012, Football Outsiders ranked them 24th. Now, 2013, here's the one you got to pay attention to. They ranked second. Their offense ranked second, according to Football Outsiders. Not the offensive line, just offense ranked second. What was the big difference there? Ken Wisenhunt. Ken Wisenhunt was the offensive coordinator in 2013. He leaves, goes to Tennessee, and in that time, they were bottom 10 the past 2 years. Like I said, last year, Football Outsiders ranked him 31st. So not that Wisenhunt is a genius, but I think Gordon's got nowhere to go but up. With Wisenhunt coming back to run the offense with a healthy offensive line, if indeed that happens, I think positive regression, you can't get more positive than going 0 touchdowns. He's got to get more than that. I mean, arguably, this was the second best running back coming out of the draft last year. And still, even though he didn't cross the end zone, Pro Football Focus, out of all the running backs, 18th was most elusive, tied for 9th with most broken tackles, 34. I'm going to be interested to see what happens. I'm not saying he's going to be a home run hitter, but I think he's going to perhaps provide some draft day value. I got to believe he's better than what we saw, and I got to believe he's going to get more than 0 touchdowns. What do you think about Gordon?
I love him. To be honest, I don't think he's that great of a player. I think the situation, though, with Wisenhunt coming back, Frank Reich was a quarterback's coach. Frank Reich was a quarterback guy. They were winging the ball all over the place. And let's not forget, Keenan Allen, before he went down, I think he was number 2 overall, maybe 3 because Julio and Antonio Brown were lighting it up so much. But Keenan Allen was on fire. He was just looking incredible. Goes down with that hurt lung or hurt spleen, whatever happened to him on that touchdown catch that he made. They had to be throwing the ball around. And you saw it with Danny Woodhead. The guy finished number 3 overall in PPR. Posted that on our Facebook page today, facebook.com/Pyromaniac. Join us over there, please. But I think with Wisenhunt back, he is a great balanced offensive coordinator. He knows the importance, and they have a good attack in the air. They need to be able to scare people on the ground. I think that Melvin Gordon will slide. He was the 51st running back ranked. People look at these stats, they look at where they finish up, and they don't have the intuition to project what can happen in the future with certain players, especially a guy that was drafted, 16th overall in his rookie year. I think he can get it. He's going through a whole season. He's got to figure out that fumbling issue that he had. He's got to stop getting banged up. He might need to stop lifting so many weights. When you see that guy with his shirt off, he looks a lot more like Mr. Universe than he does an NFL running back. But I'm certainly thinking that he will come as a value. He's the kind of guy that's going to be available in that 4 to 6 round range. And if I'm running with that guy as my RB2 at that kind of value and the upside that he could potentially bring to the table, I'm down with Melvin Gordon. Now, again, he's got to figure out the fumbling, and he's got to get the opportunities. But I didn't hate his opportunities that he got this year. You know, he had 33 catches, he had 184 carries, and he's pretty much shitty. Missed 2 games. I think he missed a lot of that other game as well. That gave him 14 played. So we'll see. We'll see. They say he's a 3-down back, but you know, when he got Woodhead there, it's tough to keep on giving him so many opportunities. But I like a Gordon on the value he's going to be getting. Yeah, he was the 15th player taken in the draft second running back behind Gurley.
Yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of recency bias. I just looked currently. You know, I don't know how accurate these ADPs are right now. That might not even be reflective. Going in the 6th round, which probably still early for me, being that he didn't really put it together last season. But I just got to believe with Wisenhunt, improvement at the offensive line. And if they can, God, they got Woodhead, who's fantastic. Once they get some healthy Keenan Allen, keep defenses honest. I think we really didn't see, kind of like a Baltimore situation, we didn't really see the offense nearly with the potential or the chemistry that it should had because they were just so banged up. I think we're going to see a totally different look in San Diego and in Baltimore next year. I
agree. Hey, at the 6th round, I still like Melvin Gordon. Yeah. There's something about the hunch with him. I think that there's a value there with a guy that could be getting 225 carries and have a good situation with Wisenhunt back in the mix on a team that I don't know. I don't know what their schedule is going to be, strength of schedule is going to be, but I'll keep my eye on that. But I can see a guy that's working really hard this offseason to make sure he has a good season and sticks in the league, and I like that about Melvin Gordon. I think he just got to get out of the weight room a little bit and worry more about football speed, football plays, and not as much about his brute strength.
Yeah, and I know you guys talked about this a little bit earlier, but Smash Mouth TV Radio asked, who would you take number 1 overall? And you're saying, Gordon in the 6th. I think we're both kind of on board with wide receiver early and often. There's a handful I'd easily take top 4 or 5 wide receivers that I'd probably go with first. And then after 3 rounds, I'm playing running back roulette pretty much and drafting as many guys as I can get. We just see them. They get so banged up. It's such a volatile position. The second half of handcuffs are rising to the top. There's so many guys that you can get later or guys that didn't even go drafted that you can get at running back. So for me, I'm taking Antonio Brown, many a wide receiver, I think, before I'm even looking to running back. They're just too injury prone, too volatile, too many busts. Wide receiver, go safe. Just did the interview with Matt Harrison from League Safe. One of his big things was you go safe early, and then later you're playing getting a bunch of running backs, and then at the end of your draft, you're going for home runs and your big swing guys.
Yeah, no, I agree. For me, the wide receiver, it'll probably be a Julio would be number 1. Antonio Brown will be right in there, and an ODB for me. I can't do without knowing that situation in the quarterback with Nuke. I can't go super high on him quite yet, but I could see them getting a great quarterback. Imagine if they had just taken Derek Carr 2 years ago. Imagine if Derek Carr was Houston. And I love the Raiders. I'm happy he's on that team. But could you imagine for Nuke if he had Derek Carr slinging him the ball instead of that poo-poo platter that he's got going on now? Smash TV. I said ODB is one of those wide receivers that I would consider if I had one of the first 3 picks, he's one of those guys that I consider there just because he's just on a different level. He's ridiculous.
Yeah. There's quite a few. I think guys that I would take, wide receiver, guys that I would take. Like I said, I'd probably go Antonio Brown first, Julio right there, ODB I'm going to be taking. And, I would even go Hopkins. I think that's one of the key selling points to Hopkins is the dude did it without a quarterback. So the guy's got nowhere to go but up. Now, a guy like Allen Robinson, now, which I loved last year. I had a little bet with, though we never finalized it, I had a bet with Staggs. I thought Robinson would do better. Staggs took Macklin. I knew Robinson was going to be in line. However, I'm not so sure he's going to repeat. And I think he's going to be, Robinson, I think, is the guy that's going to be overdrafted. I've got no problem taking Antonio Brown, Julio Jones, ODB, even a Hopkins early, first round. No problem with that. But Allen Robinson, I'm not so sure. I think you might see some negative regression. Guy had 14 touchdowns, which tied for most with wide receiver. And if you look at quarterback red zone, my goodness, was Blake Bortles tossing a ton. He led the league or tied with Aaron Rodgers for most red zone passes. They were just throwing a ton in the red zone. And I don't know if, one, they're going to be in the red zone as much and they're going to throw as much next year. So I think with Allen Robinson, you might see some negative regression.
I agree. But he's ridiculous. And when I see him and he's at the video, the eye test for me with Allen Robinson, I felt like he wasn't getting the ball enough last year. I feel like he makes one of the best plays of the season for the wide receiver position essentially every game. I feel the same way about Nuke, and obviously ODB makes insane catches too. Landry does it too. But, I mean, eye test with Allen Robinson is insane. That guy makes unbelievable catches. One thing for you guys out there listening, at Pyromaniac, we do amazing graphics, and we're all into the aesthetics of things too on Pyromaniac.com. And Allen Robinson on his Twitter account and on his Facebook account is using Pyromaniac created graphics for his cover picture and his profile picture. So check some of that stuff out. And if you're not familiar with our site, Pyromaniac.com, through coming to the website itself, and this is your first experience to what we're doing here over this Blab, please check it out because we're doing something that's a lot different. We do a year-round podcast. We do 2 year-round podcasts. We do the Pyro Podcast Heavy, which is essentially me, Dogmatica, Houdini, and Stag Party. It's 4 of us. Bringing a lot to the table and a mind share. I've been doing fantasy since 1988. Yes, I am old. And then Mo, who I've got on the screen here with me today, does the Pyro Podcast Light on a weekly basis, and that show is terrific. He's doing a lot during the off season, a lot of fantasy football talks where he interviews other people in our industry, other fantasy football experts. This week, you interviewed Denny Carter. And that's the Late Round QB and the streaming the QB podcast. That guy's awesome to follow on Twitter. He's one of my favorite people. He's not only talking about fantasy, he's kind of a smart guy, and he just does really cool things. So check him out. Other guys you've interviewed in the past are, just a smorgasbord of some of the best in the industry. And Mo, you got to mention here on the show, who are you interviewing here after the combine and draft stuff's over?
I got, just to show a couple that I've got coming out, we've got certainly David T. Thomas, who has been scouting in the NFL for 40 years, started working for Al Davis and the Raiders 1968, showed up 1967, said, I want to be a scout. He was 14 years old. Al Davis said, put something down on paper. Came back the next year with like 3,000 typed words and got hired by Al Davis. The guy's phenomenal. So we got a scout that we'll be talking to. Someone was Paul Chargian. Just talked to him. He's on his way to the draft. He's going to do an interview right after the draft. So Paul's one of my favorite follows. He's been hosting Fantasy Football Today, the longest running radio show about fantasy football. Has been hosting it for 20 years. They've been doing it for 21. Also talked to Christopher Harris from the Christopher Harris podcast. He is also busy with draft or combine. I'm going to interview him he was a huge guy on ESPN for quite a while, and now he's doing his own thing with the Christopher Harris podcast. I'll be doing him right after the Combine, and just had the confirmation that Matthew Berry from ESPN will grace and be kind enough to talk some fantasy football with me. We'll shoot the breeze. He, too, is going to be at the Combine, but looking forward to that. So got a lot of cool interviews coming up, and one thing we're trying to do at Pyro is sort of peel back the curtain, get inside the minds of some of those people in the business. And that's the great thing about Pyro is we're giving you our ideas, but then we're also trying to share other ideas and, you know, teach you to fish, not just tell you who to start on a given week and tell you what to do, but really have you learn from the experience. That was one of the great things about Denny Carter's interview is he was giving great stats. If you're going to stream, you know, if you're streaming quarterbacks, these are the two statistical categories you want to look for. If you're streaming tight ends, this is what you want to look for. Defense, this is what you want to look for. So the Fantasy Football Talks, I think, do a great job. Tons of people in the industry like Christopher Harris or Paul Sargent or Matthew Berry that's going to be sharing their thoughts. So that's really exciting.
Well, you do a great job with that, and I think, you know, we won't talk too much more about this. Let's get back into some breakouts, but you do a great job. The way that you, I'm totally different. I'm more of a rough around the edges kind of guy. Probably one of the crazier guys in the fantasy football industry. I talk shit on the industry. I've talked shit on Barry, and I just, in general, just kind of I'm going to be more like the Gallagher brothers from Oasis than I'm going to be, you know, hugging the industry. And that's hurt us in some regards probably since we started in 2009. But you've done an amazing job with bringing the industry closer and embracing and being this unbelievably affable and just friendly figure for us at Pyro. So the interviews you've done are awesome. And whenever I listen to your Pyro Podcast Lite every week, and I tend to listen to a lot of them more than once, and the interviews for sure. I've actually listened to already twice the Denny Carter interview that you did this week, and that is a great one. I really, really like that guy. So if you guys are out there listening right now to this show, check out Denny Carter. Check out RotoViz. That was one of his favorite sites. Check out the Late Round QB, and their show is Living the Stream, which is a podcast for streaming. Their main expertise is streaming quarterbacks. So well, let's go back to a couple more of these things, and then, you know, of course, we're getting long, but whatever. It is what it is. So let's throw out a few more guys, and then we can take it from there. Should we go to a position we haven't touched yet, and that's tight end?
Yeah, go ahead and throw one out. I think the one I would probably name is probably one of the guys you're going to name, but go for it.
Well, we'll just name the two guys that I think we'll talk about right now. Will Tye, I like the opportunity he's going to have. He's a ridiculous athlete. He was a rookie last year. I like the situation. Who else are we going to be are they going to be throwing to besides OB Jr.? And I think right now Will Tye's got a lot of opportunity. Hopefully he's working hard this offseason to really become a main part of that situation there. So I like him. And then another one that I like is Clive Walford, the second-year player out of Miami. I think the situation with Derek Carr proves that he should get a lot more opportunities. You even look at the last 4-ish games, he really became a part of the situation there in Oakland. So I'm digging what I think that Clive Walford can bring to the table for Oakland at tight end. And both those guys, I think, can be breakout candidates that you'll be able to get super deep late in your fantasy football drafts. And the upside of them is really nice.
Well, yeah, two things with Will Tye. I like that one. One reason, mainly just because Eli loves to throw when he gets in close. Past 2 seasons, he had the third most red zone passes in the past 2 seasons. 99 the year before. He was right up there this past year. So, again, Will Tye, he really didn't get going until half the season. He showed a lot of promise, I thought. And Manning loves to throw when he gets in there. I really like his big body, nice compliment to ODB. And, yeah, Clive Walford, as we know, it takes tight ends 2-3 years, maybe even 4 on some of these guys. It takes them several years to get acclimated to the NFL. It's one of the biggest jumps positionally that guys do. There's just, it takes time for them to get used to the routes and to get used to what they're supposed to do. Very hard to make that jump from college to NFL at the tight end position, and I'm really excited with, like you say, the options they've got going there. If Latavius can get it going, the two wide receivers they've got in Amari and your old boy, the Tech, yeah. Plenty of options, and if Walford can start making his hay over the middle, you know, he was one of David T. Thomas's favorite tight ends coming out of the draft last year. So I'm really excited, and Carr is just, he's another guy that I'd throw out there for perhaps a breakout season next year. I think everything is trending the right way since he got into the league. He's done phenomenally well with his touchdown to interception ratio. So I like that offense, and I like both those calls. And again, it shows why you can stream the tight end position. Guys like that will be coming up. A Walford, who wasn't even relevant this year, could certainly be relevant next year. And guys like Will Tye, who basically stepped up after the injury occurred, and you can grab later in the season. So another reason you can stream tight ends. I like both those calls at the tight end spot.
Awesome. Well, I guess a quick bounce back guy, Jimmy Graham. Do you think he can bounce back? Is this a guy, or is he done? Is that knee injury too much? And then obviously someone that I tweeted about earlier in the week, and it got PK Ripper all fired up, and he mentioned him again just here beneath, is Jay Samaro. A guy that's just been, he was injured last year. If Fitzmagic can even have remotely the kind of season that he did last year, and Jay Samaro can be a part of the situation. We know the numbers are coming down for Brandon Marshall. There's no way possible that he can keep that up. And Jay Samaro's got a nice body and a nice form to him. He could be in for a really nice breakout. He's kind of a merger, a bounce back, breakout, arrival, but whatever it is, I could liken it almost to Jay Samaro. Could be a kind of guy that could have a season, maybe like Bennett's first season in Chicago, Martellus Bennett, when he kind of kept on just like not getting it, and then all of a sudden he came to Chicago and had a nice season. I could see Jay Samaro having that situation, as with the guy down in Tampa as well, Safari and Jenkins.
Yeah, Safari and Jenkins, if he can get healthy, I like that. With also there in the Jets, it's going to be interesting to see what they do with those two wide receivers. I loved Decker last year. Talk about solid guy that's not sexy, but he never had, I don't think he had double-digit touchdowns this season, but my goodness, you could just plug him in for a TD every game. I think he missed one game with injury, and besides that, there was only 3 games, I think, that he did not score. So 3 of the games that he actually played, he didn't score a touchdown. The rest he did. Never double digits, never sexy. But man, if I got him for my wide receiver too, I'm super happy. But a guy that, Jason Morrow you talked about could be coming up. Devin Smith, often forgotten about wide receiver from last year, speedy guy, really, really talented. I think he got a year under his belt. Certainly, I think there's a lot of mouths to feed at the table, but I think the offense could open up a little bit. Devin Smith might be able to do something. He's maybe more of a sleeper call, I guess, if you're going to quantify it as something. And last one you mentioned there, no, I don't think Jimmy Graham's going to come back. Patellar tendon. I talked to Will Carroll, who is the injury expert over at FanDuel, and he kind of confirmed it. I did some digging when Stags and I did Pyro Light podcast early on, and I looked at past patellar tendon injuries. It's not good. History's against folks. Cadillac Williams, I think if you're going to look at call anything a success story, it would be him from the patellar tendon, and that wasn't much. Besides him, every single other player did statistically worse once they came back from the patellar tendon. So and not only that, but it leads to other injuries. Look, Victor Cruz, he didn't re-injure the patellar, but he had all sorts of other injuries around it. And so I don't think Jimmy is going to be singing it anymore over in Seattle, sad to say.
Did he get microfracture surgery or no? Jimmy.
I don't know if it was microfracture. I don't know about that. I don't remember Will Carroll mentioning that. I know he injured the patellar tendon with the injury. And again, that's the same injury that Victor Cruz had, Cadillac Williams.
I think it must not have been that, because I think when you do microfracture, that's when you're doing bone on bone and you don't have any cartilage in there, and they're basically they drill holes in your knee to create new cartilage and new non-bone on bone type of action. So
yeah, no, Jimmy, he had patellar tendon for sure. That's what he injured, and like I said. The other guy who was the Arizona running back was another one. The name is eluding me, but really great in college. Never was able to get a footing in the NFL because of the patellar. Like I said, I think I looked back and I found about 17 guys, 22 total. But I think there was, and this is last year, so I'm going off my memory, which, as you know, is not good. But there's no success stories. Nobody comes back from this. We just saw it with Victor Cruz. And like I say, Cadillac Williams, and that wasn't even a success story. But that was the only guy I found that had patellar tendon injury that actually had a statistical year that was better after the injury. No one else was able to do it, and I don't think it's going to be done with Jimmy Graham. One guy, well, since you mentioned the microfracture and no cartilage, I'm going to toss out Jay Ajayi as a breakout guy. I love Gase, like you said, hot young coach, and I got to think Miller's going to be gone. I think he's going to be playing elsewhere. And I know, Ajayi, you're concerned with the lack of cartilage and the amount of abuse he's going to take. But short term, this year, I think he could be fantastic. He could have a great year.
I like it. I'm going to stick with it. A guy that's a second-year player, Matt Jones. I really think I don't even know, when you look at the numbers on the guy who owns the Bentley, the Mazda. Why am I spacing his name right now? The running back for Washington Alfred Morris, the least sexy guy around. But dude, he had his first 3 seasons, he had 1,000-yard seasons. He was lighting up. He was doing well. His average is more than 4 yards a carry. I don't know how he fell out of favor so quickly there. But his loss is Matt Jones's gain. Jonesy is the guy that Scott went out and grabbed. He said it was his next next Marshawn Lynch. And we know Scott Peterson was the guy that built the Niners core crew, the guy that built the team right now in Seattle that's killing it, and the guy that brought in and made some of the moves like grabbing Marshawn Lynch. So I think that what they're going to do with him there with Matt Jones is going to be exceptional. You saw it in a couple instances throughout the game. He's got that explosiveness. He is he's legit, dude.
Yeah, he's another guy had a fantastic preseason, and like you said, there was running back by community there. And now, Alf, is going to be gone. I think he's going to be ready to take over the reins. He's explosive. I love him, Matt Jones. I think he's going to be great. Answering a question here, and then I see the wife glaring at me, so I'm going to have to wrap it up here.
I got to split too.
The one guy that asked, it's the Smash TV Radio. Fantastic, buddy. He's been really chatting with us, and so I hope you check out the Pyro Light and the Pyro Heavy podcast. Give us a follow on Twitter. I am at PyromaniacMo, just like it sounds. The regular boys are at Pyromaniac. That's with the 1 instead of the I. PYROMAN, the number 1 AC. And, of course, find us on iTunes. We're going to be on Blog Talk Radio soon. But check us out. He asked, how do you guys make your rankings? And I guess maybe if you want to talk about our tiers, essentially as part of the draft kit, we also have a subscription service that you can check out on Pyromaniac.com. You can find all the info. But essentially, D-Rex, you want to field it? I mean, we are big believers in tiers, and then we do the cumulative tiers as well. So how do we assemble our rankings, if you would?
Well, the beautiful. I'm actually was working on my tiers all weekend, which is I was supposed to have them all weekend, which is I was supposed to have them done tonight. I thought I would, but then I just got an invite to go see Kobe in his last game ever, and in the United Center. So I'm not going to pass that up. I'm going to the Bulls game. I'm supposed to be at a restaurant here in the next 20 minutes, and I haven't showered, so I got to shut this thing down, or I'm going to get kicked out of the Kobe party. But we basically tiers is essentially what we do. We've gotten our draft kit. And on a week-to-week basis, we got Dogmatic on our website. He kind of does our player rankings, so we tote the company line on our website and our player ranking section, and we really stick with those. But now on our draft kit and week-to-week and on our podcast, each of us are doing our own tiers. We collectively each do individual tiers that are in this draft kit. And then what we also do is we do a collective version of the tiers or the player rankings as well, is where we add all of ours. Mo's, PyromaniacMo, who's the other guy on the screen right there. Mine, I'm D-Rex, Houdini, Stag Party. And then we also have, who am I missing there? Party. There's one other person I'm missing, and we do all five. We merge all of our rankings together, and then that column kind of is the average of all of those. And basically, that way we're able to kind of have our own take on it and not say, I don't always agree with Dogmatic's rankings. I don't always agree with Stag Parties. I'm my own person in fantasy football, but we try and come together as a company. So sometimes it makes it a little more confusing. We want to have one set of rankings that is the way we live and die by, but at the same time, that's not really the way we work. And I don't know. I think it shows through on the website, because we're not just sitting here saying this is what Pyro thinks. We all are on board with this, and that's why some of these podcasts and our discussions here on Blab are great, because we're not just sitting there like a lot of the other podcasts out there and a lot of the other fantasy football shows you hear out there. It's just an agree fest. I mean, all the shows that I listen to out there, it's like, I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more. Oh, yeah, I'm spot on. I'm right. And by the end of the show, it's like, is there one thing that these guys didn't agree on? And it gets quite old. And I think that's one of the things lacking in fantasy football talk is the discussion, is the bouncing of ideas, the counteraction, saying, hey, the devil's advocating. And I think that's something that Pyro brings to the table a lot through our podcast, through these blabs, and through everything we do. We're not just all saying, oh, yeah, if that's what you say, I'm on board with that, because that's just not the way the world works, and that's nor the way we want to project our mind share for fantasy football.
And that's why I love our draft kit. We're working on it now. It's going to be coming out shortly, but if you
15th of March. Version 1, 15th of March.
And if you buy the first one, you get all the updates. What do we have, 5, 6 last year?
There will be more this year, because we're getting the thing out a month and a half earlier than we ever had before.
And the beauty is, it continually adds and gets better. But for me, as I listen to the heavy and as I have guests on the light, and then, of course, during the season, the light is focusing on the week-to-week stuff. But the preseason, my tiers are changing based on what you guys say, people I talk to, and it's always in flux. And the more discussion, the more non-agreement. I mean, ideally you want to agree, but the more discussion, the more back and forth we have. I think our tiers, our rankings, our idea of fantasy is only going to be stronger and better. That's why I love the fact when you buy our draft kit, you can find each individual's ideas in tiers, but then you can see the collective and see how it changes as we go from talking to one another and from battling it out and from having blabs and these conversations right now. That's only good stuff.
Blabbing it out. I love it. Last thing I'm going to say, and then let's shut this party down. I'm going to rattle off a few guys that I think are in for a breakout season. And I'll just name one of them, really, maybe two. Devontae Parker. I think he's a guy that can have a breakout season in Miami. A guy that should have a bounce-back season, hopefully. Depends on what the QB situation. But Nelson Aguilar, another one of David T's favorite guys coming out of school. He was dreadful last year. Got drafted way too high. But I could see Aguilar turning around and having a much better sophomore campaign. So I don't know. I don't think he's a breakout. I think he's more of a bounce-back. So there you have it. I got Des Bryant, I think, is going to have a bounce back for sure. Randall Cobb's due to have a better season with Jordy back. So just wanted to put some of those guys out, but we won't go in too deep into them. For you guys that are listening to us here, check out Pyromaniac.com. We're doing something different there. I think you'll notice that. check us out. Sign up and subscribe to our podcast. If you're hungry for fantasy football early and year round, we don't stop. And check us out on Facebook. Check us out on Twitter. And here on Blabs, we're going to be doing a bunch of Blabs throughout the off season and through the regular season. And fantasy football, we're passionate about it. So we're psyched to have this new outlet. Please subscribe to us for down here while you're on Blab. Subscribe to us here so that when we have another show, we can hit you up and you'll know that we're recording and whatever, and you can get us real time. Fantasy football. What do you got, Mo?
Just real quick, you threw out some that we didn't quite get to, but I'm liking for Breakout. I'm liking Lockett a lot. Seattle wide receiver Snead down in New Orleans. I'm liking a lot. Let's not forget about Josh Gordon. Don't know where you want to categorize that guy, but he's money. Marvin Jones, where he might land, and Michael Floyd, I think, could be on the cusp of perhaps his best season next year.
I agree, man. Awesome stuff, guys. Thank you for listening. Mo, always a pleasure to talk fantasy. PK Ripper, good to have you on this new format, homie. Thanks, everyone. Have a good night. Enjoy your Sunday.
Thanks, guys. Peace. See you next time.
Bye-bye.